Hello, and welcome to our last Hawkeye Lunch and Learn of the semester, just the semester. And we want you to stay tuned because we will be telling you a lot about what the spring 2017 Hawkeye Lunch and Learn lineup will be. And you can go to our website, which is right there on the screen, outreach.uiowa.edu to find out more. Can also find out more on social media. Today, I'm very pleased to present Lynn Reddington, and she serves as the University of Iowa Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students. And in that role, she oversees students, and often there are conflicts or problems, but I was talking to her just the other day, and we were talking about how we really think this office can also be one where there's a focus on many of the positives that happen when students need help, and we have an office like this on our campus, so it's incredibly important. She's involved in the University Club, Student Legal Services, and the Center for Student Involvement and Leadership. She earned her BS, MS, and PhD from Iowa State University, and she's worked in a number of universities before coming to the University of Iowa, and previously was at the University of Northern Iowa. So please join me in welcoming Lynn today.
Thank you, Linda. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. So there we go. I think what I had told Jade when Jade asked me how I wanted to be introduced was, this is Lynn, and she's kinda cool. Not super cool, not cool at all, but just kinda cool. So I am really excited that you're all here, and my goal today is to hopefully share some information as well as keep you all awake while you eat lunch or snack or whatever it is that you're going to be doing. So I was asked to talk about life lessons from University of Iowa students. What I hope you will keep in mind is that I have been here at the University of Iowa for almost a year and a half. So some of the lessons that I've learned are really more recent, and for some of these lessons I went back and talked to my colleagues to learn from them. But one of the things that I will always do, well, this is our agenda, unless I skipped something. No, this is our agenda for the day. This is what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you a history of residence halls. So, and who does not want to learn something when you come to this, right? The other thing that Linda did not say is that I serve as an adjunct instructor over in the College of Education. So we do have a quiz at the end. I'm kidding, but I really did bring a quiz. But we're going to talk about the evolution of residence halls, kind of how they started and how they got to be where we're at. We're going to talk about University of Iowa residence halls so that you have a history of what we do here. And then life lessons, and then I'm going to give you a call to action. But first and foremost, this is what I call podium privilege. So this means that since I am up here and I have the microphone, I get to basically kind of talk. So I thought I would share just a little bit more about me. As Linda said, I earned my degrees from Iowa State University. So certainly when I was younger, the Hawkeyes were awful. And perhaps one of the reasons the Hawkeyes were awful was because I was at Iowa State in the early 80s when the football team at Iowa State was truly awful. And so it seemed that every single time I went to any sporting event, Iowa State came out on the losing end. So that's kind of my history was Iowa State, but then I worked at a lot of other schools. Most recently I was at the University of Northern Iowa for 21 years, and then this position opened up. And perhaps one of the primary reasons that I decided to apply for this position is because the other thing I want you to know about me is I have twin daughters who are sophomores in college. And so this job opened up when my daughters were graduating from high school, and I thought, oh my gosh, how incredibly exciting. So as I talk, you need to understand that being a mom to college students does help inform what I do and how I do it. The other thing that you should know is that one of my daughters wanted to stay close to home, and so she went to the University of Northern Iowa. The other daughter wanted to go away to school, so she applied and was admitted, and we came to the University of Iowa for orientation, and I had never told her I had applied for this job. So after I was given an interview, I thought, well, maybe I better tell her that. So when I came here to interview, they gave me an Iowa t-shirt, and I brought that home, and my daughter's like, well, that's really cool. Can I have it? And I said, well, if I don't get the job, you can have it. So I was very fortunate, was offered the job, put on that t-shirt, wore it to the ice cream store where Amy worked, and she's like, nice shirt. Great. So, and I think we kind of went that way until the first day of school, where she moved into the residence hall that morning. I started my job that afternoon, and she realized by that night that she had access to a car. So all was kind of right with the world. So I just wanted you to know a little bit more about me. So evolution of the residence halls. One of the things that I want you to know is they used to be called dormitories. And perhaps a lot of people still call them dormitories, they call them dorms. But those of us who work in higher education or who have worked in student affairs, or certainly who work in housing and dining, prefer the term residence halls. And the reason being is because dormitories, come from the word dormant, which means to sleep, and that's used to be what happened. People would sleep in the dorms. But now there's a heck of a lot more that happens than just the sleeping or even the eating piece. So I wanted you to know that while I might use the term dorms interchangeably with residence halls, they're kind of all the same thing. This is the first residence hall. This is at Harvard. And Harvard was our first institution of higher education here in this country. But one of the things that, if you'll notice, is it was very imposing, very monastic. In fact, and granted, I've never been to Harvard, so if anybody else has, you can correct me. But my understanding is that the windows open up to a courtyard, whereas on the outside of the building, it's going to be just a wall, because they were built for privacy and to ensure that students were studying. The 19th century dorms, see, a little different than perhaps what they are now, where they were just beds lined up. Students needed to chop, cut, haul, pay for their own firewood to keep warm in the early dorms. And of course, these were all for men, because women did not go to college back in the 19th century. In the early 20th century, things started to change. Now, if you'll notice kind of on the walls there are some pictures, and there certainly is the Nebraska thing, which we did just kind of beat Nebraska this weekend. But there's some pictures of women. So women were still not allowed at the universities, or if they were, they certainly were not allowed in a male residence hall. So what the men did was they started putting posters and pinups of women in their residence hall rooms. So women in the dorms, this started then really kind of in the 1940s. During World War II, when men were off at war, women were applying to and getting accepted into colleges and universities. But again, they couldn't stay in the same building as men, so these were built for women. The GI Bill. The GI Bill really kind of brought more men and families back to the university. Now, I included this very handsome man here because that's my dad, and he went to school here in the 1950s and as a part of the GI Bill. So I wanted to make sure. And so I've heard lots of stories about what he did, and I've told him that if he was a student now, he would be in my office in trouble for what he did. But the GI Bill did bring a lot of folks back to colleges and universities. And now some of the places that families were living were really not very, well, they weren't nice. They were sometimes barracks. They were sometimes Quonset huts. Some of them had running water, some of them didn't. I think it was at Michigan State where the family housing, married student housing, they called that complex Fertile Valley because they thought more babies would be born. So civil rights started in the 1960s, and so, of course, colleges and universities were at the heart of that. Students were really promoting and pushing for civil rights for all. They were becoming real activists on college campuses. This book here, Invisible Hawkeyes, actually just was released in the last few months by Dr. Hills, Dr. Lena and Dr. Michael Hill, who both work here at the University of Iowa. And what they did was they have profiled the Invisible Hawkeyes here at the University of Iowa. So African Americans who have their stories, but who their stories were not told because of the color of their skin when they were here. And so the book is amazing. The authors are even better, so I would encourage you to pick up a copy of that. Student activism, it continued. There were, well, this, I'm not sure if this was a picture of this, but women were really standing up for their rights, wanting to have equal place at the university table, as it were. And so they even had what they called bed-ins. So they would kind of climb onto beds and not leave. Columbia University was a real big one where the women were very, very active about trying to earn equal status, but it still took, I think it was in the 1970s when women were fully admitted into Columbia University. So women started really pushing. They wanted to live in the same building. They wanted the same rights. They wanted to be able to have some of the same rules. One of the people who works here at the university, if you're ever interested in reading a dissertation, Dr. Angela Reams wrote a dissertation about the history of alcohol use in the residence halls here at the university. And I know that she was able to gather a whole bunch of the different rules and regulations and student code of conduct for over the years. And so she said it went from like a one-page mimeographed page to a whole book of different rules and regulations. But certainly we had different rules for women than we did for men. Co-ed living, of course, then happened. So all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but kind of in the 70s and more so in the 80s, women and men were able to live in the same residence hall. Some schools had men and women able to live on the same floor. So I went to school at Iowa State in my residence hall, which has since been imploded. The bottom 3 floors were women's floors. The top 7 floors were male floors. And our hall, or the doors to the stairwells on our floors, locked. I think it was at 10 o'clock at night. The elevators did not stop on our floors after 10 o'clock at night. But I could go up to any men's floor, but the men, this was to, I'm sure, protect me, could not come down to my floor. The computer generation. So certainly when our buildings were built, well, computers, some of the computers hadn't really even been invented. So they were not wired, they were not set up for this new computer generation. So in the 80s, this really took some time and a lot of money to change the infrastructure to get wiring into the residence halls so that we could accommodate the computer generation. And this hasn't stopped. So certainly at the start of this process, we were hardwiring residence halls, pulling wires and pulling cables, so that students could hook up their very big desktop computers. And now we're into providing wireless internet connection. But this picture here actually is, I think, very realistic. I went to a movie the other night with my husband and my daughters, and before the movie started, all three of them were on their phones. I probably would have been, but I forgot my phone at home. So all three were on their phones, but now it's not even just that a student brings a computer, but they bring a phone, and they bring a tablet, and they bring a game station, and they bring multiple other electronic devices that need to be connected. So it's making sure that the residence halls are prepared not just for it used to be one port per pillow. So if Linda and I were roommates, we would each be able to plug in our one computer. But now we would have to be able to connect, maybe 5, 8, 10 different things. And we want it now, right? We want it automatically. So that's been one of the real challenges of keeping up with the residence halls and as the world has changed. So the cost of living. This might be where I'm going to get my notes. So I think I have some notes on this. Cost of living. So these are actual pictures of some residence halls, not on our campus. I know. Oh my gosh, can I digress for just a moment? So yesterday I got this link and I sent it to the executive director of housing and dining and the interim director of residence education. I can send it out. But they're a new complex, I think it's called The Villages, is being built here in town, which is exciting. But I was watching this link and it keeps showing all of these people out by the pool. And I was like, so yeah, it's getting awfully cold here, and I'm just not sure that students will be able to use the pool all that often here in Iowa. I used to work at the University of Arizona where some of the residence halls had pools and students still didn't use pools all that often. Anyway, true residence hall there. So from 1995 to 2004, 17% of the 113 residence halls constructed across the country were traditional dorms, meaning those double rooms with the community bathrooms. The vast majority were apartment-style complexes. So now more and more tanning salons, Mongolian grills, hot tubs are kind of becoming very standard as you think about what's coming in a residence hall. And part of it is it's really not necessarily the university saying we want to do this because we think that a tanning bed is going to help you be successful at a university. Instead, it is what students are telling us. It is what families are telling us, and it's what people are demanding, in part because it's what they're used to at home. So my daughters shared a bedroom until, gosh, I think I finally relented and gave in when they were in junior high. They could have their own rooms. Now, when I talk to families during summer orientation and I ask them how many of their students share a room, there are probably about maybe 500 or 600 family or parents in the room, and I have had no more than 10 people raise their hand. So very, very, very few of our students share rooms, so coming to school and having to share a space can be really challenging for them. I know that my daughters, we gave them TVs when they graduated from high school. They never had TVs in their bedrooms, and somebody looked at me and was like, really? Never? And it's like, well, no, of course not. What if they get grounded? So anyway, that's kind of what's happening. There is a story about, and I don't believe that this, I just hit something, sorry. I don't believe that this happened on this campus, but a student had signed up for housing. So Virginia, this might be important to you. And the student asked about housing accommodations for his butler. Okay, good. Did not happen here. Maybe next year. So I wanted to share some dining rates. So our current rates, double room with air conditioning, $6,700. Now that does include money for laundry, and a full meal plan is $34.20. So that's for the academic year. 99 to 2000, it was $2,400 for the room and almost $2,000 for the meals. And in 66, 67. $880 and $630 for the meals. So costs have gone up pretty significantly, although, and I don't know about inflation, so I haven't done any of that, but I also think that quality has gone up, the variety of what you get to choose to eat has gone up, food is being cooked to order for students now, certainly dietary restrictions are being considered. So it's not that you go down your line and you get your, here's some mashed potatoes and here's some roast beef and here's some carrots and you're done. Now you get to really say, today I'd like an omelet and Cheerios. So anyway, those are some different rates. Berea College, which is in Kentucky, I thought it was interesting and wanted to share this with you because Berea College, I don't know if they charge tuition at all, I'm not sure, but they require every single student to work at least 10 hours a week on campus. They buy their food they get their food from the gardens that are taken care of by students. The furnishings for the residence hall rooms come from the woodworking shops on campus that are done by students. And so it's a very self-sustaining campus institution, which is kind of exciting. And it looks very nice. So wanted to give you a history, and I do need to explain. So SUI, does anybody know what that stands for? Thank you very much. State University of Iowa. I've always said that, and that's always what I call it, just because I do kind of like order. So you've got ISU, UNI, so we should have SUI. And I always thought if I got a personalized license plate, it would be SUISUNI. Then I could have all three. But I don't want anybody to know where I park, because it might be easier to give me parking tickets. So, history of SUI. Here are, so I'm going to kind of hopefully fairly quickly go through our residence halls. Courier then, and Courier now, and this is my daughter. So I had to ask the hall coordinator, go ask a picture or take a picture, and she's like, why? Why did you need that? So anyway, Courier Hall is, here's where I've got some other notes, just so I don't miss it. So this was built to address the housing shortage for women. Now, let me go back. So when did the State University of Iowa come to be? 1847, I think. So I think we're coming up on our 150th year. So 1847, our first residence hall was 1914. And that's because we were unable to get state appropriations from the state to build a residence hall, even though the university said this is really critically important. They weren't able to give money for it. So Courier built to address the shortage of housing for women. And there were in there a beauty parlor, a soda fountain, and they had formal evening meals before which that they would sing grace. And at mid-century, some residents said that there were men from across the river would serenade them. So thought I'd share that. Quad. So the quad used to be, it no longer is, it was just torn down this last fall, but I believe that there are bricks for sale. So if anybody is interested, you can buy a brick. So Quad was built in 1920 at the request of the U.S. War Department to serve as barracks for the Student Army Training Corps. And the Quad is the birthplace of student government here at the University of Iowa. So student government of students who live in the residence halls and who want to get involved, and they take on leadership positions. FYI, Niall Kinnock lived in Quad, so that's kind of cool. And I think maybe John Glenn lived there when he was in the Army. Hillcrest, and we do have the former hall coordinator of Hillcrest, Angela Ibrahim Olin, who is here, and so wanted to share that. If you ever want a tour, it's kind of referred to as the Labyrinth because so many different additions have been made. So if you do want a tour, my guess she could hook you up. But it was the building. This building was rented. Well, first it was opened as a men's residence hall. And it was rented by the Navy during World War II to house cadets. And the saying is, when old gold gave way to navy blue. Park lawn. And this was built for married students. And going back to the handbook of rules that Angie would probably be able to lay her hands on, there was a 1950s edition that stated refrigerators must be cleaned and defrosted weekly. Yeah, I think that means you unplug it, right? I don't know about the cleaning piece, but Burge was named for Adelaide Burge, who was the Dean of Women. And it was built for women, and to kind of follow suit, pink tile is found throughout the building. And it has had several nicknames, one of which is called the Zoo. But my understanding is, of late, it's kind of been quite the great place to live. Hawkeye Court and Drive Apartments. Married student housing again, renamed family student housing or family housing. And let's see, Hawkeye Court Apartments are going to close this August. Is that correct, Virginia? Part of it just has to do with the aging of the facilities, and certainly some of it has to do with the demand. But we do still have some apartments for families. Dom, also built as an all-women's residence hall, and it is connected to Burge by a tunnel, and has often been referred to as Baby Burge, which I don't know if anybody still calls it that. But Mayflower, now I actually drove on Dubuque yesterday for the first time in weeks, and it wasn't as bad as I guess I had thought it would be. But as you can see from the picture on the right, Mayflower has been impacted by floodwaters a couple of times, pretty significantly. Hearing about the floods when I was a little bit up north, it was just absolutely amazing to hear about how fast and how efficiently and how effectively the community pulled together and really responded. But one of the traditions in Mayflower was to spell out Iowa in the lights, and that has been brought back the last couple of years, which is really kind of fun. So raising, I don't know if we're raising the street or, I don't know, something or other, so that hopefully Mayflower will no longer be affected. But when Mayflower opened, it was billed as a luxury residence hall, and I believe that there was a pool in there, but that was closed. Did you swim in it?
No, but
so there's a pool in there, but it was
by a private company, not by the university.
Oh, okay. So closed it because of budget cuts, unfortunately, and now I would say safety reasons. Reno and Slater are kind of, I don't know if, I call them the twins. I don't know if anybody else does, but they look very similar. Just a couple of things, which I think is really fascinating. Reno Hall is named for Robert Reno. He was the Dean of Men. And Robert Reno is one of the founders of NASPA, which is a national, actually it's an international association for folks in student affairs. So that's really incredible that has been, this incredible opportunity for thousands of professionals across this country and across the world. Really is founded here at Iowa. And then Slater was named for a football player, Fred Duke Slater. He became a judge. Sadly, and ironically enough, Duke Slater was African American and would not have been allowed to live on campus, not allowed to live in the residence hall named for him. Stanley, built for women, when Amy lived in Stanley last year, I don't know that she ever did her laundry there because she always brought it home, but it's nice to know that she could have if she had wanted to. Peterson is our currently newest residence hall, and this woman here in the middle is Mary Louise Peterson, and this woman here is Rachel Zuckerman, who just walked in at the back. She's giving her wave, is the president of our undergraduate student government. So anyway, Peterson Hall. Now, a couple of things with Peterson that's really exciting is that It was built to support living learning communities. So the numbers of students who are living together on floors is a little smaller. They're able to study in kind of some pod areas. They are housed together based on either academic majors or interest areas. So it's really to support their academic success and their initiative. And Catlett is our upcoming, soon-to-be newest residence hall, built right on the river, which is going to be stunning. And if you can see the windows that are on the end, I think it's, how many rooms will have a...
It will house 149 students, and those rooms on the end are all study lounges.
Okay, so everybody will be able to look at the river, even if they don't have a river view room. But yes, we're gonna, I think it's 1,049 students will be able to live here starting this fall. Oh, and I do want to point out, it's named for Elizabeth Catlett, and she was one of first African Americans to earn an MFA, Masters of Fine Arts, and went on to become an incredible sculptress in this country. So it might be interesting to learn more about that. Okay, so why should students live on campus? Well, let me tell you, it's because I don't have another slide. So they really should live on campus because students do better academically. It has been proven time and time and time again that if students live on campus, their grade point averages are higher than students who live off campus. And if they live on campus for more than 1 year, their grade point continues to remain higher, even at that second year, or if they're lucky enough, their third year. They graduate at a higher rate. They're more likely to be engaged academically. They're more likely to interact with faculty, to use university resources, including the library, to attend study sessions. And it really is an incredible opportunity. I'm so excited that our Housing and Dining Department knew that there was a need and took action to add to our inventory so that more students can live on campus. So I think we're going to be at 7,000?
7,208.
So to be exact, 7,208 students will be able to live on campus next year, which is amazing. So that is great. Okay, so lessons from University of Iowa students. Shall we begin? Let me make sure I still have time. Okay, I still have time. Icebreakers and Tootsie Pops. So what I believe, first and foremost and underlying everything, is that residence halls are community. And that's really what we get out of it. We get community. We meet our friends. It might be our roommate might be our best friend, our roommate might not be our best friend, but we meet folks that become our community. And that is what is so critical, because those communities then go out and you're walking across campus, it's like, oh my gosh, I just saw you in the bathroom. I know you, and now we can talk. Or I have 5 students in one of my classes, and they all live on my floor or in my residence hall, and I can have a study group with that community. The thing with communities, however, is that you have to know somebody's name. So what happens in residence halls is we do icebreakers. Lots and lots of icebreakers, and if we had a different room, we would be doing an icebreaker right here. But it's an opportunity to get to know one another. So it might be a real popular one, and you all can do this maybe over dinner with family or with your neighborhood. It's called 2 Truths and a Lie. So what you do is everybody thinks to themselves, what are 2 truths about me and what is 1 lie? And then you say them like they're all true, and then everybody has to guess which one is the lie. So it's kind of a fun little thing. So I didn't plan what I would say, but 2 truths and a lie. I like to cook. I like to make crafts, and I know how to crochet. Okay, I hate cooking. I really do. I'm just not good at it. I think I can be, but when I first started, we had a potluck, and I said, oh, I'll make something, and so I sure did. I bought Costco spinach artichoke dip, put it in my own dish, brought it in, and it was like, here you go. And I was outed when somebody's like, what is in this? Can I have the recipe? Yep, it's at Costco. So So anyway, the important thing really is to make sure that people know your name and that you know who you are in community with. So an example about this is, and Angela, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in Hillcrest, some students wanted to recognize somebody's birthday. And so they had a cake and they had candles, but they know that they cannot have candles in a residence hall. And they didn't want to violate the quiet hours policy because people were studying. So what they did was they got their cake, they put their candles in, they went outside, they lit the candles, they knocked on the student's window and sang happy birthday to the student from outside in. That's kind of incredible that the students followed policy and were able to celebrate that community. Oftentimes, we do think on a college or university campus that learning only happens in the classroom, and certainly learning does happen in the classroom. I would never say that it doesn't, but learning also happens outside of the classroom. It happens by being a part of an organization, by taking on a leadership position, by volunteering and getting involved in Dance Marathon. Learning happens everywhere. And one of the things that really stood out for me was at Iowa here, we have the Iowa Challenge. So 5 components of excel, stretch, choose, serve, engage. So these 5 words that folks can kind of rally around and really build their college career around. With the learning happens, one of the programs in the residence halls is Hawks Help Hawks. And so we had a student who had gotten to know his community quite well, had had too much to drink of an adult beverage, and a friend called the EMTs to make sure that his friend was going to be taken care of. And as the student is being wheeled out on the stretcher, and he was conscious, he saw his friend, and his friend's like, "I'm sorry, I don't want you to get in trouble." And the student on the stretcher gave his friend a fist bump, and he said, "Hawks help Hawks." So I hope he learned something then, and I also hope he learned something for future, but certainly his friend learned something about standing up and doing the right thing. Oh, gosh. So a gathering of ones. Was anybody on this field? Is anybody in this picture? Really? Yeah. Yes. We have our student body president and vice president in the back, and they were in here somewhere. I think I saw some things on Facebook. So a gathering of ones. Again, going back to a residence hall is a community, as is a university. And so I look at this picture, and certainly we could separate out every single individual, but we can also look at this and say, we are a collective. We are the student body, the faculty, the University of Iowa. We don't have to say that it is this person and that person. It is us together. So let's see here. Oh, gosh darn it. I need to figure this out. I do apologize. Right, okay, so a gathering ones. So I think that's where I consider what we are as a university is that collective. We are the. So I'm not going to go out and say that every single time I'm going to talk about students, that we have 33,334 students at the University of Iowa, and I'm not going to name them all by names. I'm going to talk about our students. I'm going to talk about us as a collective, us as members of this Hawkeye family, understanding that all of us contribute something to what we're bringing. High touch and high tech. So, the internet. I talked earlier about wiring the residence halls. Certainly, the internet has changed how we interact. My mom, who is in her 80s, loves to text. And it just, honestly, it drives me nuts because she She thinks she's, well, so she's texting. The other thing is she's now on Facebook. And so I kept getting these individual comments from my mom on Facebook, and what she was wanting to do was respond to somebody, her grandnephew had just decorated a tree. She wanted to comment about this picture, but she just put a different post on each time. So all of a sudden my mom has like 30 different posts, and I was like, okay, Mom, let's talk about this. But the internet has changed how we do things. So how many of you have cell phones? How many of you actually use your phone to talk on? So some? I hate talking on the phone. I really do. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. My daughters have phones, and one of their phones doesn't, it works for texting, it works for email, it works for all internet, but it does not work for a phone. There's some kind of static thing. It hasn't worked for 6 months. She doesn't care, hasn't bothered her at all. It bothers me if I do try to call her, but the internet has changed how we interact. It's gotten easier to connect, but it's also added some challenges. So there was a letter writing campaign in a residence hall here a couple of years ago. But what they did was they wrote letters and they sent emails to troops overseas. So certainly back in the day, it would have been, we're just going to send a letter, we're going to do something. But now it is writing letters, it is sending emails, it is finding those connections, and embracing how we use the internet to make those communities and to connect. So butterflies and porcupines. So I believe that oftentimes, pretty much anywhere, you're going to find somebody who is absolutely lovable. That would be the butterfly, somebody who is so easy to love. So it could be that you're at work and you have somebody that you work with and you know that that person will always, always, always come to a meeting or will volunteer to help out, or who will, write notes for everybody. It's that person who is easy to love. But we also have these people who are kind of the porcupines. They're a little more prickly. Sometimes it's a little harder to like them, or it's harder to get to know them. And that's true in a residence hall as well. So a few years ago, there was a student who had really, honestly, he had just been a jerk in the residence hall. He had been fussing with staff. He would not follow protocol. He wouldn't follow policy. If the RAs approached him for his behaviors, he would fight. He would not physically fight. He would just be obstinate and ornery with them. And he went through the conduct process several times, but every single time the RA would reach back out and say, hey, I'm having a program, or hey, we're going to go to dinner, or hey, we're going to go do this. Would you join us? Would you come along? And that's hard to do. It's very easy to do, again, if somebody is saying, yes, yes, pick me, I will do anything. It's harder to go to that person who's just been tough to deal with all along. So time moves on, the student moves off campus, and I'm sure a lot of people breathed a sigh of relief when he did. He graduated, and a couple of years later, he sent a letter back to that RA, and he apologized. He said, I am so sorry for behaving as I did, but thank you so much for putting up with me and for continuing to try to make that connection with me. He said, it was because of you that I managed to continue to go on. Now, we don't always get those thank yous, we don't always get those gifts, but I think it does go back to show that we don't always know when we're making a difference. And so sometimes it's more important to do that with the porcupines than it is with the butterflies. So small sparks become bright fires is, I guess for me, this is my daughter Amy, who is a student here. So again, Amy and Emma are twins, and they are as different as night and day. Emma is very extroverted and charismatic, and she has never met somebody she does not know and is not a friend with. Amy is, she's the older one by 9 minutes, and she is hyper responsible. She's very introverted, and she came here, and I know she came to the University of Iowa because she wanted to be able to blend in. It's a big school. She could just kind of do her thing. And so I saw Amy coming here to the University of Iowa, really hanging out with her friends from high school. She lived with somebody that she had known in high school. She hung out with. Her little group of friends were all from her high school. And what I have seen now is Amy started out, she applied for some student jobs. She got one job as a desk clerk in Courier, going back to her picture. And since then, she has applied for and been promoted and gotten a lead desk clerk. She's gotten to know a couple of faculty members. She's, in fact, a faculty member told me that he had just nominated her for something. She's very, very involved. She has now met some friends, really good friends. And so I look at this and I see what this institution and what the residence halls have done for my daughter, and it certainly it warms my heart, but it makes it so much easier for me to talk about what an incredible gift the University of Iowa is to this community and to this state and to this world, because I see it firsthand. So, call to action. I do expect everybody in here to get a flu shot. Who has gotten one? Good for you. I see some hands. Maybe I should ask who has not. I would be the not. Danielle, maybe you and I can go later. Maybe. Maybe. Or maybe during flu season we could stay at home. I think, how many of you have eaten a meal in Hillcrest or Burge? How many of you have eaten there recently? Okay, if you haven't done so recently, get in there. Oh my gosh, the food is incredible. I really do think it's one of the best restaurants in town. So I think you should go. Now, I will say that lunch is kind of busy. So maybe if you go at a time other than, you know, smack dab at noon, that would be good. Breakfast is amazing. And if you want to wait, you can certainly wait until next fall. When Catlett opens, there will be another dining center in Catlett. But I urge you to go. It's, I think the appropriate term is all you care to eat. It's not all you can eat. So it's not a competition. But it could be if you want. But go in and certainly just make yourself at home and spend some time with your students. Talk to them and find out what's going on with them. Learn more about Elizabeth Catlett. Visit the hall when it opens, and I'm sure that there will be tours of Catlett as it nears completion. And then living learning communities. I talked briefly about this when I was talking about Peterson Residence Hall. We do have living learning communities spread across our campus. So if somebody is interested in the arts, in theater, we have programs for women in science and engineering. So learn about the living learning communities. Maybe there's some things that you could offer that you could get involved with. Maybe you'd like to sponsor, you know, a tour of your place of employment. But I think that there would be lots of opportunities, and I know that they would not turn you away. So I'm going to go back to icebreakers and Tootsie Pops. Alex is going to have she's waving her hand back there. She's going to have a basket of Tootsie Pops. So I do expect that you will each take one, if not more, and that you are going to meet somebody, whether somebody you know or don't know, but spend some time getting to know folks so that you also are creating that community for you and for others. Does anybody have any questions? So in my class, this is what I would refer to as mouth breathers. Yes?
So what has been the hardest lesson for you since you arrived?
Oh gosh. So the question is, what has been the hardest lesson that I have learned since I have arrived? Probably the most difficult lesson has been, because I don't work directly with the residence halls, how to try to get involved without being pushy, so that I can get to know the students and to support them. Going from a campus of 12,000 to a campus of 33,000, I know that I won't know every single student. But not knowing students very well and not having that relationship is hard. So Brandon here, we were at UNI together. Brandon now works with, is it ITS? Here at the university. So we're Panther Hawkeyes. And so I knew Brandon. I know his wife, who's expecting next week, a baby, that is, expecting a baby. And so to be able to have this relationship here is fun. I would like to be able to have that with more students. So it's been how to kind of break in. Does that make sense?
I love the history of the not dorms, residence halls you talked about. And I noticed you didn't call it the mega dorm. It actually has a name. Where do you see them going? Do you have like some issues on the horizon or new things on the horizon that you see?
It's a very good question about where do we see residence halls going. We will continue, I think, to build more upscale residence halls. I don't think we will ever lose the need for the traditional double room, double loaded corridors, where you've got the rooms and some type of a community gathering space. I think we'll always have need for that. But I also believe that having more inventory, a different type of residence hall on a college campus is important. So you put the first year students in that environment where they can get to know people, and then you move them on into a suite style where they're living with a group of people. Maybe it's 8 people, maybe it's 10 people together, and then you move them into apartments. So I think it's providing for a variety of living options. I think what I honestly see is figuring out how to get faculty into the residence halls. Some campuses, I think it's Clemson, has had faculty, just in the last couple of years, faculty move into residence hall spaces, and they're living in apartments. A friend of mine is a vice president at New York University, and he has said he will always live in a freshman residence hall. Now that could be because that's Manhattan, and and housing is hard to come by, but he's very, very, very involved in working with students. So I think that's part of it. I think it's trying to make the learning more seamless, and making sure that we are able to handle the internet needs, the space needs, the privacy needs. So. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel the living learning communities have made a big difference? And how would you describe that?
So the question is, do I feel the living learning communities have made a big difference? I don't know enough about them. I think that they're probably, I believe right now they are being reviewed. I think it's important that we be intentional with learning communities and really figure out what we want to have come out of them. So do we want to have students in the same major live together? Do we want students in the same interest to live together? Do we want students in the same classification to live together? And I don't know that one is better or right, because again, with this many students, what's right for one is not going to be right for somebody else. And so I think it's having a variety. For me, the biggest thing and what has been the most important is breaking down those silos. That a student, when a student comes here, I don't believe they look at and think, okay, I'm going to go to the organizational chart. And if I have a question, I have to go to this department because this is only what they care about. They look at the University of Iowa as a whole. And so how can we help? How can we support? And I think that has helped so that they understand that if I'm struggling in my computer science class, I can go to academic support and retention. I can go to the IMU because there's a space down there. I can get supplemental instruction. I can talk to my RA. I can actually talk to a faculty member and have that be the message I think is most important. The other thing that I do think that is ever present are families. That families are becoming more involved with students, and maybe it's that pendulum again. When I was at a different institution, I did have a mom move into the residence hall with her daughter, and gross. But I think it's figuring out how we can best tap into and partner with families also. Yes?
Will there be temporary housing next year, do you think?
Will we have kind of expanded housing? You know, I don't know if we're going to need it. If we do, I'm sure that we will offer that. What I will do is I will defer to my colleague here who oversees that process.
Sure. I'm Virginia. I work in housing and I don't know West, but we are going to do our best to house all of the incoming students that would like to live on campus. And so for some students, that may wind up being that even though we've got a new residence hall, we also know that more students would be interested in returning to the halls next year. And so making space for everyone sometimes means that we have expanded or temporary housing. But it's beneficial because it means that they get to participate in the residence halls. And over the course of the year, when we have natural attrition, then people move into permanent spaces.
Sometimes students don't want to move out.
And no, they don't.
It becomes home, they like it, and so, so I hope we don't, but it's a good problem if we do. So, was there, yeah?
So with regards to the learning communities,
Mm-hmm.
I know there'll be a new one, or maybe it already is, for Black students.
There is one this year, Young Gifted in Black.
Do you anticipate there'll be other learning communities for other minority groups?
So the question is, do I anticipate if we'll have more learning communities for different affinity or multicultural groups? And I don't know.
We have one right now coming on board for All In. So, yeah.
Feel free to join me, Virginia.
I know right now we have another group. So Young Gifted in Black is wonderful because it was promoted by students. They said we want this. And so we have another one that's coming on board next year called All In, and it's targeted towards LGBT students who have put together a proposal for a living learning community geared towards LGBT students and their allies. So I think as students speak up and find their voice on campus, we'll continue to.
So I guess that's the way that the university operates, right? If students ask for it, we make it happen.
Yes, I agree. And it doesn't mean that it's always easy, but it does mean that we need to be responsive and we need to reach out to these students. And so I think sometimes we might rely on students to have to speak up, and maybe what we need to do is start asking questions so that they feel more empowered to speak up. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.